Hey there, you ever hear those massive, like trillion-dollar numbers on the news about the economy and wonder, what does that actually mean for me, for my paycheck? Well, today we're going to connect those dots. We're going to go on a journey from the biggest economic measure all the way down to the money that actually ends up in your pocket.
So where do we even begin? The best way to think about it is this. How do you grade a country's economy? If it were a student, what would its report card look like? That's really the big question we're tackling today.
Okay, here's our game plan. We're going to build that report card by basically following the money. We'll kick things off with the absolute biggest number, the gross product. Then, we're going to start peeling back the layers, kind of like an onion. We'll look at wear and tear, bring in the global view, and then track the money until it lands right where it matters, in our pockets. And we'll wrap up by seeing how it all averages out.
Right, so getting into it. You can't just say an economy is good or bad. That doesn't really tell you anything, does it? We need actual, concrete measurements. We need grades that tell a real story. And that, my friends, is the whole point of what's called national income accounting.
And it all begins with a simple but huge idea. Let's try to measure everything a country produces in a year. I mean everything. The cars, the coffee, the software, even the haircuts. It's a massive job for sure, but it's the absolute foundation for everything else we're going to talk about.
So, that giant number, that total of everything produced, yep, it's got a name, and I guarantee you've heard it 1,000 times. This is our starting line, gross domestic product. You know it as GDP.
So what exactly is GDP? Okay, stick with me here. It's the total market value of all final goods and services produced within a country's borders in 1 year. Now, those two words, final and within, are absolutely key. Final means we count the finished product, say the bicycle, but not the tires and the frame separately. That way, we don't double count. And within is all about geography. It doesn't matter if it's a foreign company. If the factory is physically inside the country, it counts towards that country's GDP.
And believe it or not, economists boil all this activity down to a pretty simple formula. GDP is basically just four things added together. First, you've got consumption. That's all the stuff you and I buy. Then there's investment. Think businesses buying new machinery. Third is government spending on things like highways or defense. And last, net exports, which is just what we sell to other countries minus what we buy from them. Add them all up, and that's the engine of GDP.
Okay, but hang on a second. That word gross in GDP, it's a little bit misleading, isn't it? I mean, think about it. To make all that stuff, machines get old, equipment breaks down, trucks wear out, there's wear and tear. We got to account for that, right? That's called depreciation.
So, to get a more honest picture, we need to go from gross to net. And all that means is we take our GDP number and we adjust it for all that wear and tear. When we do that, we get a new number called Net Domestic Product, or NDP.
Here's a good way to think about it. NDP shows you how much new value was really created, but only after you've kind of paid the bill for using up your tools. It's what's left over. It's GDP minus the cost of all the stuff that got worn out in the process.
And the math here is super straightforward. You just take GDP and subtract depreciation. That's it. It might seem like a small tweak to the formula, but it gives us a way more realistic look at what a country's actually producing. All right, so up to this point, we've been totally focused on what's made inside a country's borders. But, the world is way more connected than that. What about a country's citizens who are working abroad, or its companies that have operations overseas? To capture that, we need to change our lens a little bit.
And this brings us to a really important difference. Domestic product is all about where the work is done, the geography. But national product is all about who is doing the work. It's about the country's residents and businesses, no matter where on the planet they are earning that money.
So how do we get from domestic to national? Well, we make an adjustment. We use something called net factor income from abroad. It sounds complicated, but it's really just the money that a country's citizens make overseas minus the money that farmers make inside that country. You add that little number to GDP, and boom, you get gross national product, or GNP.
Okay, great. We've measured what a country produces. But let's be real. That massive GNP number, that's not what you and I get to spend, is it? Nope. Companies hold on to some profits, they pay taxes, a whole lot of stuff happens before that money finds its way to us. So now, let's follow the money trail all the way down to our pockets.
And that brings us to a number that feels a lot more real. Personal income. This is exactly what it sounds like. It's the total income that households actually get their hands on.
And this is super important. To get this number, we have to subtract all the money we don't see, like corporate taxes or profits that companies just plow back into the business. That's cash that never hits our bank accounts.
Getting to this number is all about figuring out what really lands in our accounts. So we take the national income, we pull out the money that gets held back, like those corporate taxes. But then we have to add in money that comes to us from the government. Think things like Social Security checks or unemployment benefits. Those are called transfer payments, and they're a huge piece of the puzzle for what people actually have to live on.
And here we are, the last step on our journey to your paycheck. This is really the bottom line. It's called disposable income. This is the money you actually have control over. It's what's left for you to spend, to save, to invest, after the tax man has taken his share.
Honestly, this last step is the easiest one of all. You just take your personal income and subtract what you pay in personal taxes. What's left is your disposable income. For any family's budget, this is the number that really truly matters. It's the cash you have to work with, plain and simple.
So let's just quickly run through that whole funnel one more time. We start with the big one, GDP. We take out the wear and tear to get NDP. Then we factor in the global stuff to get GNP. From there, we adjust for taxes and other things to find personal income. And one last subtraction for personal taxes gets us to disposable income. See? It's a clear, logical journey from the huge national number down to your wallet.
All right, we have one final idea to talk about. So far, we've gone from this giant national number all the way down to what's in our wallets. But how do we compare that across different countries, or even just make it more personal? How do we make these giant figures relatable?
The answer is something called per capita income. It's a really simple idea, but it's incredibly powerful. You just take the national income and divide it by the number of people in the country. Now, obviously, this doesn't mean every single person earns that amount, not at all. But what it does is give us a pretty useful average for how much income is generated for each person in a country.
And this simple bit of division, that's the final piece of our puzzle. It's what lets us compare economies of totally different sizes, like, say, a massive country with a tiny one, on a much more apples-to-apples, person-by-person basis.
So there you have it. We've made the whole journey, from GDP all the way down to per capita income. We've built our economic report card. But that leaves us with one last big question to chew on. These numbers, they're great for measuring money and economic activity. But do they tell the whole story? We've learned how to measure a nation's income. But can we actually measure its well-being?